In my estimation, last week was a tremendous Lord's Day here at Cross Point that began with Tyler calling us to worship by us collectively singing, "Blessed be your name." Every blessing you pour out, I turn back to praise. And when the darkness closes in, I will still say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." And I want to personally thank you for the tremendous response and encouragement that you gave to me in regards to our lesson entitled, "What is Your Story?" And I hope that springboard then into a great discussion, period of worship in your small groups. We had a fabulous beginning to our life group ministry. We had 45 groups that met all over the Quad Cities area. We had 2 groups that were unable to meet, but all total we had 606 people that assembled in homes throughout the Quad Cities and participated in a wonderful period of fellowship and a period of worship, a period where we got to know each other. And then a discussion took place about different ministry opportunities, and prayer was led for the empty chair. And I hope that you enjoyed your first meeting, and I hope that you got to know people in your group just a little better. We want to encourage you this week to continue to go deeper into those relationships and get to know one another better. We believe you'll be blessed, and the church here at Cross Point will be blessed as a result. In the group that Summer and I were in, there was an interesting opening that the leader did for us that I thought was fabulous and helped us all. We had 8 children in our group, and we had a wide age range from those of us 2 couples who were empty nesters to those who had young children. But the group leader sent a piece of paper around, and we all had to write something about ourselves that the group might not know. We turned them into him, he read them, and all of us then had to guess who that might describe. The children really got into it, they loved it, and we found out things about our group that we did not know. I hope your group did something similar, where some of you maybe even told your story, or where you just got to know a brother or sister in Christ in a better way. And again, we want to encourage you as the weeks go on to get to know each other better. This week we're going to go a little deeper into the Word, and where last week we talked about our own individual story, the premise behind this week's lesson is this: that every life group is going to, over time, develop their own story and have their own story. And your life group's story may be different than someone else's, but we always want to keep the 5 purposes for that group in mind, the very reason why we're having them to begin with. Let me reiterate those 5 purposes one more time and tell you the one we're going to stress this coming Sunday. We want to make sure that you have a wonderful period of worship together, and I trust you'll look forward to it. We also know that fellowship will be an easy part of us getting together in homes. We also want us to go deeper, though, into discipleship and what it means to be a real follower of Christ. And I hope some of your discussions last week helped that as well. And then we want each group to be very intentional about some aspect of ministry, where you can be the hands and feet of Jesus to people in this city. And then we stressed the empty chair. And I hope that each one of you put an empty chair there as a visual reminder that there's someone who needs the Lord and someone who needs us, and there's someone right around us who needs what we have to offer. Let me encourage you again to pray over the chair. Begin each assembly with prayer, close it with prayer, and be mindful that that empty chair represents some person in your neighborhood, some person in your life, some person whom God brings in your path, who could be blessed by your life group. So we're going to study the story this week that's found in Luke 19. It's a very familiar story. It's the story we call of Zacchaeus. But it's an evangelistic story where Jesus really tells his mission about why he's here. We'll have a teenager read the mission from Luke chapter 4. That came from the prophet Isaiah that Jesus read about himself. But we will also then talk about the mission that Jesus said that he had come, the Son of Man had come to seek and save the lost. So we want to stress this week that fifth purpose of evangelism, because it very well might be the one that often gets overlooked in our fellowship and worship time if we're not intentional about the empty chair. So you know the story, how that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, and we're going to stress the point that Jesus resolutely set his face to go to Jerusalem, and that meant he's going there to die for you and for me. 3 times in the Gospel of Luke, he's going to tell his disciples, I'm going there to die. And we're going to stress at the beginning of the lesson a passage in Luke chapter 10 in verse 20 that you might read, or you might discuss, or you might, as a life group leader, emblazon on your mind and saturate your mind as you lead the discussion this week. Because those 72, the 12 and the others he commissioned, were given the authority and the power to go out and do many wonderful things in his name, and they came back all excited and giddy about what God was doing and what they could do. And Jesus said, do not rejoice because you're blessed this way and you can do these things. Rejoice, here's the point, because your name is written in heaven. And that's the bottom line when we peel through everything. The bottom line is the fact that we're a child of the King and a brother to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And people all around us need him. And that's the purpose of the empty chair. So we're going to talk about the story of Zacchaeus. And we're going to talk about his life story and what his story was about, and how that he was a notorious sinner. One writer called him an outcast of the outcast. And we'll ask the question, what's it like to be an outsider? And you might even talk about the fact, have you ever felt like an outsider? Whether it be some clique, whether it be at church, whether it be at school, whether it be some group that you'd like to be a part of but weren't. What does it feel like to be an outsider? That's the way he felt, and it happened because of his own choices. And when he wanted, in curiosity, to see Jesus, Jesus saw him. The text said he looked up. And Jesus, in the only instance that I can find in the Gospels, Jesus invited himself to go home with Zacchaeus. Because he did, of course, Zacchaeus' life changed forever. And Zacchaeus, in a true conversion story, then made 2 commitments: that he would help the poor and that he would make restitution for his wrongs. Now, an interesting part of the story that's often overlooked is this. All the people of Jericho, when they saw Jesus going home with Zacchaeus, they began, the text said, to mutter, to grumble, to complain. And we're going to ask the question, are you a friend of sinners? Are we a friend of sinners? Is Crosspoint a church where people know that they can come and they'll find fellow strugglers who have burdens, and they'll find a place where they can lay those burdens down and people who will help them carry them, as Galatians 6 says. And we'll close this lesson then with an empty chair, with the empty chair, and we'll talk about the fact that that empty chair represents several things. It's there to cause us to remember, just like communion. And why do we take it? Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. It's because we have a tendency to forget. We put the empty chair there to collect people. We put the empty chair there to collect burdens. And finally, we put the empty chair there to collect joys. And so we want to highlight this week the empty chair and the story of Jesus going home with Zacchaeus. And we hope that your group will grow numerically and that people who need the Lord, or who feel like outsiders, or have been turned off maybe even by organized religion or by the status quo of church in general, will be attracted to Jesus because they'll see people in his likeness that are striving to embrace his mission. So we hope that this week will be a blessing to you, that you will continue to figure out how your group will best function, and that you will be intentional about the 5 purposes, and specifically not neglect the purpose of evangelism and seeking and saving the lost. God bless, and continue to press on.